is Dr. Rohita Amaravitarana, specialist in internal medicine, the moderator of the today event. Lunchtime feed is a 1 hour online session. The speaker is a specialist in medicine and talk to you on important and interesting medical conditions with current updates. At the end of this lecture, we have 10 minutes to discuss questions from the virtual participants. Please send your questions to Q&A box. Also, we share two links, QR codes before and after the lecture. There are two MCQs, true or false questions. Please answer the questions before and after the lecture and submit to get your CPD e-certificates. The questions are same pre-session and post-session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Harsha Satish Chandra, a past president of Sri Lanka College of Internal Medicine, to address the virtual participants. Over to you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Harsha Satish Chandra.
Thank you, Rohita. Let me warmly welcome you all to this important activity today. I'm Harsha Satish Chandra, one of the past presidents of the Sri Lanka College of Internal Medicine. And on behalf of Dr. Madhuvanti Hettiarachchi, the current president of the Sri Lanka College of Internal Medicine, I warmly welcome you to this activity. I think lunchtime feeds has become an important activity in our calendar since its introduction, and probably because of the timing of the activity as well as the careful selection of topics that are discussed here. So the aim of the College of Internal Medicine is to actually get the practitioners in internal medicine well equipped with cutting edge knowledge about important topics, and so that they will in turn use that knowledge and apply that knowledge for the better care of our patients. So today we have a very important topic that is going to be discussed, and I must thank Dr. Upul Pathirana, consultant chest physician, for agreeing to be the presenter today. And I think without taking much of your time, I will now invite Dr. Rohita Amaravitarana to introduce the speaker and continue the program on this important topic of pleural infections. Over to you, Rohita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harsha Satish Chandra. And now we are moving to the lecture today. Let me to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Upul Pathirana. Dr. Upul Pathirana, MBBS Colombo, MD Colombo, FCCP USA, FRCP London, FCCP Edinburgh. Dr. Upul Pathirana is a consultant respiratory physician working at Chest Clinic and Base Hospital, Putlam. He graduated from the University of Colombo and completed his local training at National Hospital for Respiratory Disease, Valisara, Sri Lanka, and overseas training at Royal Brompton and Harefield NHS Foundation Trust, London, United Kingdom. He is going to talk on pleural infection, translating evidence into practice. Over to you, Dr. Upul.
Let me to share my slides.
Yes.
Okay, hope you can see my slides.
Yes, we can see. Now we can see.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I must thank the President and the Council of Sri Lanka College of Sri Lanka College of Internal Medicine, and especially Dr. Rohita Amaravitarana for inviting me to talk in your lunchtime feed. Hopefully, I suppose it will be appetizer, may not be nausea or vomiting during your lunchtime. So without taking much time, we'll talk the proper topic. So when we come to pleural infection remains a common medical problem with significant mortality and morbidity despite a better understanding of the etiology, pathophysiology, and recent advances in management approaches. And pleural infection continues to cause a significant and considerable burden to health systems worldwide. We being internal medicine physicians and also respiratory physicians provide shared care for this type of patients, and patients are being managed in your units and also in our units. Therefore, putting the hands together, hope we can make a difference in outcome of our patients. The talk in next 30 minutes intend to address the key areas of new evidence. And this is based on recent BTS and also ERS guidelines. Right. So here, I want to emphasize the importance of physical examination to recognize pleural effusion early before talking about pleural infection. So we know patients with pneumonia directly admit into our units and they develop later pleural effusion during their hospital stay. So that is one scenario. And some other patients admitting directly, so on admission, they have pleural effusions. The classic physical signs of pneumonia is consolidation, that is dullness on percussion and bronchial breathing. So when we see the patient with pneumonia on admission, so we have consolidation signs, dullness and bronchial breathing. And during stay, when we do our routine ward rounds, then it converts to stony dull percussion note and absent breath sounds. By that time, patient has developed pleural effusion clinically, and your patient with pneumonia may have not improved by that time also. Right. To further emphasize that one, you can see in my slide, the patient here admitted to surgical casualty. The reason to admit surgical casualty is abdominal pain. And then they have the surgical team has seen patient is breathless, therefore proceeded with the chest X-ray as well. You can see here the entire right hemithorax, there is an opacification. Therefore, in addition to their ultrasound abdomen for abdominal pain, they have requested ultrasound or thoracic ultrasound as well. Then thoracic ultrasound noted right side large consolidation, therefore referred to us. And then we saw the patient, we examined, the percussion note was stony dull on right hemithorax and breath sounds were absent. This is contradictory to the scan findings. So what has happened? Is that scan wrong? No, actually what happens is patients with pleural infections, so late stage empyema, thick pus within the pleural space can closely mimic a consolidated lung in our ultrasound examination. This diagnostic challenge, it occurs because thick purulent exudate generates highly echogenic, coarse and heterogeneous internal echoes. This is similar to the hepatization seen in a truly consolidated lung. So unless we examine this patient properly, we will miss effusion and we will think it is consolidation. Therefore, we won't offer treatment beyond antibiotics. Here, because contradictory findings, we did non-contrast CT chest immediately, which showed massive pleural effusion in right side and the intercostal tube drain 4 to 5 liters of pus over 3 to 4 days. In the second case, this is a referral during weekend, and I received a call, a young patient admitted with fever, high fever, and clinically unwell. Patient is breathless and she is in respiratory failure. On examination, breath sounds absent in right hemithorax and percussion note is dull in the lower zone. The chest X-ray shows left side hydropneumothorax. Again, physical examination findings are contradictory to the chest X-ray findings. Therefore, what we did was we repeat the chest X-ray. You can see here actually the hydropneumothorax is in right hemithorax, not in left side. This is in keeping with our physical examination findings. If our medical officer does not examine the patient properly and say physical signs are in right side, and by looking at chest X-ray, we will put IC tube into the normal side and avoiding the treatment for wrong side as well. So therefore, what I want to highlight is these investigations are to support our clinical findings, not to replace them. Right. So pleural cavity. When we take the pleural cavity, the space in between visceral and parietal pleura, the pleural cavity is sterile. There are no any organisms. By definition, if there is any bacterial entry into pleural space and their replication within the space, that is pleural infection. So here you can see patient has in this chest X-ray, in addition to pleural effusion, there is an associated consolidation. So if we have a patient with consolidated lung and also effusion, that is parapneumonic effusion. And when the pleural fluid, during diagnostic aspiration, pleural fluid is purulent, we called it empyema. So empyema refers to a collection of pus within the pleural space. Empyema that develops from an adjacent pneumonia, like in this chest X-ray, is a subclass of complicated parapneumonic effusion. We will discuss those in detail later. And also empyema, now it is well recognized that empyema can develop without adjacent pneumonia. And there are specific situations where empyema develop, like in decompensated cirrhosis, that is spontaneous bacterial empyema, and tuberculous empyema. I will not touch SBEM or tuberculous empyema in this presentation. And also these effusions in pleural infection can be uniloculated effusions. And when there are septations within these effusions, we call it complex pleural effusions. So these definitions have some clinical significance. We will discuss these as we move on. Right. So when we treat complicated patients, ill patients, the better understanding of pathophysiology or the pathogenesis will help us to offer pathophysiology guided rational treatment and also to incorporate evidence into our practice. A patient with pneumonia, that is, patient has consolidation. These patients, there is leakage of fluid into interstitial space. So interstitial fluid increases during pneumonia. And these fluids can move across the adjacent visceral pleural membrane into pleural space. And as we know, the pleural space is sterile, and now this fluid also sterile. Therefore, we will call this initial stage simple or uncomplicated parapneumonic effusion. These patients generally doesn't need any drainage. They need only antibiotic treatment as for in patients with community acquired pneumonia. But then in some pneumonic patients, this pneumonia can damage pleural mesothelium. Because of damage of pleural mesothelium, bacteria can invade into pleural space. Now, it tally with our definition. Now, bacteria entry and then multiply, that is pleural infection, proper pleural infection. So, this bacteria will stimulate an inflammatory response. Therefore, they develop fibrin deposition and loculation. And normally, alongside the bacterial entry and replications within the pleural space, there is migration of neutrophils into pleural space. More the bacteria, more the number of neutrophils. These bacteria and also neutrophils will start anaerobic glucose consumption. Finally, or the biochemically, this will manifest as low glucose in pleural fluid and also pH is low. And lysis of neutrophils will produce high LDH level in pleural fluid. Generally, it is more than 1000, but it may be thousands and thousands. So, in this stage, we will call it complicated parapneumonic effusion, and some of these complicated parapneumonic effusions are empyema, when the appearance is pus. So, to diagnose complicated parapneumonic effusion, what we can do is we can stain by gram stain the pleural fluid, will detect organisms, or we can look for biochemical evidence of marked inflammation, that is pleural fluid pH less than 7.2, glucose less than 60, and LDH more than 1000. Right. So majority of patients, these complicated parapneumonic effusions and empyema are, the source is coming from lungs, pulmonary source. But sometimes patients, we have patients with empyema, their source is different, coming from extrapulmonary source. Extrapulmonary sources of pleural space infection can occur hematogenously or through direct proximity to the pleural space. Common sources include esophageal perforation or intra-abdominal infections. So subdiaphragmatic focus or infected bile, etc. And also another thing I want to say is, suppose we have a patient with community acquired pneumonia, that patient develop parapneumonic effusion and finally empyema. Generally, these patients are unilateral empyema. Suppose we have a patient with bilateral empyema, that is a bit unusual. Then we have to think about a source coming from thoracic cavity, like esophageal perforation might be due to fish bone or meat bone causing esophageal perforation, and then leaking fluid into pleural space either side, causing bilateral empyema. And hopefully, if patient does not improve with treatment at stage 1, 2, then they finally goes to stage 3, that is chronic organization. And at this stage, there is a fibrous peel formation, and this will encase the lung. And once this peel is thick and fibrous and it hinder full re-expansion of the lung, we call it trapped lung. Right. So we have a patient with pleural effusion, unilateral pleural effusion, and we suspect this as a pleural infection. But may not be surely, but we have to think about alternative diagnosis as well. Sometimes malignancy also can coexist with pleural infection or respiratory infection. So, are there any place for thoracic ultrasound in unilateral pleural effusion more than the chest X-ray? Yes. So, there are things. So, by doing thoracic ultrasound, we can appreciate the size of the pleural effusion and character of the pleural effusion. Character in the sense, we can see septations, therefore, they are complex pleural effusions. And we may be able to reveal abnormalities not apparent on chest X-ray. Like, for example, nodularity of the parietal pleura in diaphragmatic surface or other areas, therefore suggesting this is malignant pleural effusion. And also, effusion mimics like diaphragmatic elevation or enlarged cardiac shadow. In that case, if we put a needle, it is going to be detrimental. And also, even the patient has loculated pleural effusion, in the area where we are going to put the needle, if the lung is attached to the chest wall, then we will puncture the lung. So all those things can be assessed by thoracic ultrasound. And then thoracic ultrasound will say whether it is safe to perform diagnostic aspiration. So generally, we go when we go ahead with again another thing I want to say, when we do diagnostic thoracentesis, we do have now more and more patients with non-communicable diseases. Patients are on now dual antiplatelet therapies. Patients are on direct oral anticoagulants and warfarin therapy. So therefore, always review whether the patient is on anticoagulation therapy before putting the table. Aspirin is okay, and aspirin clopidogrel combination also okay for diagnostic thoracentesis, no problem, even for small bore chest drain. But large bore chest drain, we should stop clopidogrel, or otherwise we should reverse it. But direct oral anticoagulants and warfarin need modifications before diagnostic aspiration. And the second thing, when we aspirate, generally we use for diagnostic aspiration, we can go ahead with needle alone, but we can't go ahead with needle alone for therapeutic aspiration. When we do diagnostic aspiration, we can use 21 gauge needle, which is usually 4 centimeter in length. But now these days, it is not uncommon to have obese patients. Therefore, 4 centimeter is not enough. Patient may be edematous. Muscular patients, again, 4 centimeter is not enough. Therefore, we need more lengthy needle. The ultrasound will say the depth from skin surface to parietal pleura correctly. Therefore, we will avoid failed pleural aspiration by measuring the depth. And also, we can assess the size of pleural effusion here, the pleural separation. In general agreement, we have to have at least 1 centimeter pleural separation for safe pleural aspiration. And finally, the standard of practice in modern days is ultrasound guided procedures. Therefore, thoracic ultrasound will guide our procedure. Blind aspiration is, even though we do, it's no longer the standard care. Right. So now we have a patient with pleural infection. Did diagnostic aspiration as well. Now the question is, which patients should be treated with intercostal drainage? Because we will treat all patients with antibiotic, and we should decide when to treat with intercostal drainage. When the appearance of fluid is macroscopically purulent. That is diagnostic of pleural infection. This is called empyema. This is a definitive indication for intercostal drainage. Right. Now, the pathway, I will simplify this one, don't worry, by looking at these complex diagrams. Now, we have a patient with suspected pleural infection. When we do diagnostic pleural aspiration, the pleural fluid is non-purulent. Suppose it is straw color, then what to do? Then what we have to do is immediate pH measurement. We should assess the pleural fluid pH. The technique of measurement of pleural fluid pH also similar to that of arterial blood gas analysis. We should use arterial blood gas syringe or heparinized syringe and put the fluid into arterial blood gas analyzer. And we have to make sure that when we assess or when we analyze the pH of pleural fluid, this should not be contaminated with local anesthetics or heparin. Otherwise, it alter the pH of the pleural fluid and lower providing wrong measurements. Right, now we have assessed or we have measured the pleural fluid pH with arterial blood gas analyzer. It is safe to do that one. And pH is 7.2 or less. That is this red area. So what does that mean? If the pleural fluid pH is 7.2 or less, they are high risk for complicated parapneumonic effusion. So they have bacteria inside the pleural cavity and they have more neutrophils inside the pleural cavity. That is why anaerobic metabolism, pH is low. These patients should be treated with intercostal drainage. And then pleural fluid pH is 7.4 or more. That means they don't have any organisms within the pleural space and anaerobic metabolism is not going on, and therefore very low risk of complicated parapneumonic effusions. They don't need immediate intercostal drainage, but periodically we should reassess these patients whether they improve or worsening their symptoms and effusion. And then intermediate category, pH is in between 7.2 and 7.4. And these patients need further assessment to take therapeutic decisions. We can immediately measure or check the pleural fluid LDH level. If the LDH level is more than 900, this is in combination with other consideration factors, like the effusion is large or the glucose is low, and there are some septations on pleural ultrasound. We normally do not offer CT immediately for patients with these infections unless valid reason. But for some reason, if we have done a CT, if there is any pleural contrast enhancement, and these are some consideration factors. So intermediate category, pH between 7.2 to 7.4 and LDH more than 900 and effusion is large, glucose low, there are septations in ultrasound and pleural contrast enhancement on CT. These patients also need intercostal drainage. Otherwise, in intermediate category also, LDH low, patient doesn't need immediate pleural intervention. So in summary, low pH less than 7.2, immediate intercostal drainage. Intermediate 7.2 to 7.4 with high LDH and other consideration factors need IC intercostal drainage. Intermediate category with low LDH and pH more than 7.4 doesn't need immediate intercostal drainage. Right. Then the next question is, what is the initial drainage strategy? The adequate drainage of infected fluid to achieve source control. So that is one principle, managing abscess as well by surgeons train it. All guidelines advocate prompt chest drain insertion once pleural infection is established. But the appropriate chest tube size continues to be debated. It has been postulated that the larger sized drains may be more efficacious in drainage of pus from the pleural cavity. Although this has been opposed by a number of retrospective studies which favor a successful outcome with small bore drains. So that is traditional thinking. So we need large bore chest tubes for empyema, but this is not in keeping with studies. And studies say chest tube bore size appears to have no effect on length of hospital stay and need for post-treatment thoracic surgery or mortality rate. And in addition to that, generally we say when the bore size is 14 or less, small bore. When it is above 14 is large bore. When the bore size is above 14, may increase post-treatment pain, which is one of the concerns in the West. And here also we concern because if patient has pain after inserting the IC tube, patient won't breathe properly. That area also not ventilating properly. And also it's difficult to offer chest physiotherapy also and difficult to mobilize the patient as well. That itself result in poor outcome. So because of these evidence, by consensus, conditional recommendations are there in BTS guidelines in 2023, and this is in keeping with the ERS guidelines as well. Initial drainage of pleural infection should be undertaken using a small bore chest tube, 14 or smaller. Smaller mean not beyond 12. So they say either 14 or 12, but these small drain need regular saline flushing. So in our setup, see in our setup, all the ward setup may not be similar and units are different. The ward may be busy casualty wards, so you can decide whether it is feasible to go ahead with regular saline flushing in your setup. And also we should consider the availability of tube and individualize to your patient whether your patient has thick pus during diagnostic tap and whether it is easily drained during diagnostic tap through your needle. So individualize whether to go ahead with small bore needle, small bore chest tube or larger one. Right. Then antibiotic therapy. Again, this is crucial to manage patients with pneumonia, parapneumonic effusions, to improve the outcome, to sterilize the empyema cavity and the lungs. When we take conventional cultures mean we take pleural fluid out and then put into a plain container, go ahead with normal cultures. These conventional cultures have the sensitivity of 50 to 60%. And if we do blood cultures in patients with empyema or parapneumonic effusion, again sensitivity is very, very low, less than 10%. So what does that mean? A significant proportions of patients will be empirical treatment throughout their treatment course because of this low sensitivity of cultures. And this sensitivity can be, or the yield can be increased by inoculating pleural fluid into blood culture media, but that also does not obviate the need for empirical treatment. And when we go for empirical treatment, we have to have the knowledge on which microorganism does cause pleural infection to decide on empirical treatment, the organisms are a bit different: community acquired pleural infection and hospital acquired pleural infection. In community acquired pleural infection, the organisms are commonly gram-positive organisms like Streptococcus species and Staphylococcus aureus, similar to community acquired pneumonia. But atypical organisms, it is extremely uncommon to cause empyema. And the gram-negative organisms are less common in community acquired pleural infection. Anaerobics commonly both in isolation and as co-infection with aerobics can cause community acquired pleural infection. And in contrast to community acquired, hospital acquired pleural infection again have gram-positive organisms, and these may include MRSA. And also gram-negative organisms are common: E. coli, Pseudomonas, and Enterobacteria. And also they can have anaerobics. Therefore, when we select antibiotics empirically for community acquired pleural infection, we can treat them with third generation cephalosporin in combination with anaerobic cover, because third generation cephalosporin does not have any anaerobic cover. We can couple with either metronidazole or clindamycin. And depending on your patient, you may go ahead with a single agent like piperacillin tazobactam or carbapenem as well. And in hospital acquired pleural infection, we need combination of antibiotics, might need MRSA cover as well. In difficult cases, we can liaise with our microbiology team as well. Right. So when we treat stage 2 and 3 disease, now you may remember stage 2, 3 disease. Stage 1 disease, sterile pleural fluid, small effusion, just need only antibiotics. 2 and 3, they have more advanced, complicated parapneumonic effusion and organized stage and difficult to treat stage. And these patients we treat with antibiotic and intercostal drainage. And our aim to sterilize the empyema cavity and also to drain pleural effusion, and also we expect lung expansion. And the results are always not satisfactory, and sometimes it is disappointing for us as well as for the patient. Here you can see, despite intercostal tube, you can see the hole. And the other thing, when we insert intercostal tubes, we have to make sure that all the holes in the intercostal tube should be within the pleural space. No holes within the chest wall. All holes should be within the pleural space. If all the holes are not within the pleural space, some are in the chest wall, we have to reinsert a tube, and we should reinsert new tube. And we should never push the tube in when it is not adequately inside. And you can see here, hole is inside, holes are inside, but still there is residual collection. And also lung is not expanded. You can see the like pneumothorax-like appearance. And also you can see some additions also in the chest X-ray. Right. So when we have a patient like this, and what is the reason? It is assumed that the lung is not expanded, and also the effusion is not drained completely because multiloculated effusions, and which is a feature of complicated parapneumonic effusion and empyema. And also, with time fluid become thick, high fluid viscosity of infected fluids. And therefore, the theoretical advantage of combination therapy incorporating a fibrinolytic agent, this is to lyse adhesions, and also DNase to thin the viscous pus. And this is the reason why people tried intrapleural therapy. And this is a potentially surgery sparing modality. And this intrapleural fibrinolytic therapy was first described in the late 1940s and long ago. The agent was streptokinase. And this agent has been used in individual patients with variable outcome. And it was not that much popular. And then there was, in the United Kingdom, there was a resurgence of streptokinase use, which occurred in the late 1980s. And this is after a successful case series reported in both adults and children. But there were some limitations when incorporating into national or international guidelines. These studies were small scale. And if we incorporate into major guidelines, they have to have statistical power as well. And this is the reason behind led to more advanced clinical trial. One landmark clinical trial in this intrapleural therapy is MIST-1. That is multi-center intrapleural sepsis trial. This trial also used streptokinase, intrapleural streptokinase, because anecdotal evidence in that case series, streptokinase improved the outcome. But in this trial, it failed to demonstrate any beneficial effect of streptokinase over placebo. Why this MIST-1 trial failed? And then clinicians postulated that patients in this clinical trial, majority were empyema, pus, frank appearance of pus, so late stage. More than around 80% of patients were empyema. And these patients in this study, infected pleural fluid is viscous, lumpy, and resistant to tube drainage. And if this is true, then reducing the viscosity of pus can improve outcomes of pleural infection. Therefore, thought about DNase. DNase is a candidate for this role since it reduces the viscosity by fragmenting the free uncoiled DNA found in pus. Then another thing, one common organism is Streptococcus species. So in this study also, majority of infections were due to Streptococcus species. Streptokinase is a weak agent. Whether the streptococcal species neutralized the streptokinase was a query. Therefore, the strategy changed to, instead of testing streptokinase, tissue plasminogen activator, and in combination with DNase. So this is MIST-2 trial, multi-center intrapleural sepsis trial 2. This had 4 arms: tissue plasminogen activator, DNase, TPA DNase combination, and placebo. And in this study, tissue plasminogen activator DNase combination improved drainage and reduced length of hospital stay and surgical referrals. And based on this study, recommendations came from BTS guidelines and also ERS guidelines. Combination of TPA and DNase is useful, and it is indicated when initial chest tube drainage has ceased and leave a residual pleural collection. But when we come to real world, in our clinical practice, this TPA and DNase combination is expensive, and it is not widely available even in some West. And therefore, practice is a bit wide. And when we carefully, in detail, analyze the clinical trial also, in these 4 arms, combination had statistical power, p-value compatible with the significant difference between placebo and other agents. But TPA alone also had significantly improved the outcome, even though it doesn't support statistically. Therefore, clinicians use TPA DNS combination when it is available, but also use urokinase and also TPA alone with some good results. So this patient actually I saw sometimes ago. You can see here again entire left hemithorax pleural effusion. This is a case of empyema. We promptly insert intercostal tube. You can see tube is well inside the pleural cavity. Initially drained, 200-300 ml it drained, but drain is not satisfactory, and there are more fluid in ultrasound chest and also CT chest. And therefore, with the permission from director and the pharmacist, we tried tissue plasminogen activator. We got the permission because this is expensive, an unlicensed indication here. And this is the result after 6 doses of TPA twice daily, 6 doses. Patient improved clinically and also radiologically. And finally, patient does not need any surgical intervention. And thereafter also, few of our centers tried this TPA approach with successful outcome. Right. So we manage these patients with intercostal drainage, antibiotic therapy, and also some patients with intrapleural enzyme therapy or TPA. And all these patients won't improve as expected, and some patients fail to improve. But there are no precise criteria describe anemia to say when to say patient is not improved following medical therapy. So it should be individualized, and these patients should be referred to thoracic surgical input, and the thoracic surgeons will offer surgical treatment, either video assisted thoracoscopic surgery, minimally invasive, or thoracotomy in more advanced cases, and where they go ahead with drainage, debridement, and or decortication. And this will facilitate optimal clearance of infected material and lung re-expansion. And ladies and gentlemen, I will summarize what we have discussed so far before ending the presentation. So we have a patient with pleural infection, either complicated parapneumonic effusion or empyema. We treat this patient with appropriate antibiotic therapy and intercostal tube drainage. And in addition to this treatment, if patient is clinically unstable or patient has thick fluid or thick pleura and difficult to drain, we can get surgical input immediately from thoracic surgeon. And so it is not the scenario, that is patient is not clinically unstable and fluid is freely draining. What we can do is we continue with intercostal drainage, anti-antibiotic therapy, review the response in 48 hours, clinical response, inflammatory markers, and any radiological improvement. If patient is fine clinically, biochemically, and radiologically, we can continue with our treatment. Once improved, we can remove the tube and switch into oral antibiotic therapy, and patient might need longer course of antibiotic therapy, sterilize the empyema cavity, otherwise it can recur early. And when we review patients after 48 hours, if there is no satisfactory improvement clinically and also biochemically or radiologically, what we can do is we can take thoracic CT scan. And if patient, after taking the thoracic CT, if again a patient is a candidate for surgery and suitable for surgery, we can refer to thoracic surgeon for surgical intervention. If patient is not fit for surgery or patient does not consent for surgery, or the immediate surgery is not possible because of other logistic reasons, we can consider intrapleural treatment. In that case, we can try intrapleural treatment, then reassess the patient. If improved, again continue with medical treatment, and not improved, again review for surgical treatment. Right. So that is the summary of treatment of pleural infection, and tuberculous empyema, tuberculous effusion, and spontaneous bacterial empyema. Those things are separate topics we'll discuss later. So thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Upul Patirata, for very interesting and very comprehensive lecture on pleural infection and empyema. Now we are coming to the Q&A sessions. Also, I would like to say, please answer the MCQs post-session assessment and submit to get your CPD e-certificate. There are yes questions. Yes, the one question is, what is the evidence of tube blocks or clots with small bore tubes, especially in empyema?
Right. So thank you very much. It's a good question actually. This is a, shall I, my video? Right, you can see me now. Yes, this is a good question actually. So when we go ahead with the small bore drain, that is the traditional concern, whether the small bore drain helps to drain this thick empyema, and also whether this tube is going to block. So during initial diagnostic tap, we put a small needle. With that needle also that fluid drain. So what does that mean? So if we put 14 gauge chest tube or 12 gauge, that is more larger than this needle. So we can drain that one actually. Even though we thought that one, that is why in studies also it is not proven the traditional thought. This blocking of tube is a frequent problem. Even it is a large tube or small tube, the blocking of tube is a concern and also problem actually. But when we manage small bore tubes, and it is a bit difficult compared to large tubes because you need regular flushings. With sterile saline, you have to make sure that you maintain sterility when you flush, and you have to train the correct technique of flushing this intercostal tube when you go ahead with regular flushings. Should be done by medical officers.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Upul. And there's one question, another question, and any specific reason to use a new tube rather than pushing the existing tube if one hole is in the chest wall?
Right. Again, another interesting question actually. Pleural cavity is sterile cavity, right? So this pleural cavity is sterile, and the unilateral pleural effusion could be due to multiple reasons. So now we talk about management of patients with pleural infection. And we don't know where this organism came, most of the time coming from lungs adjacent to community acquired pneumonia. So we put a tube, and part of that tube is within the chest wall, and part of that tube is inside the thoracic cavity, pleural cavity, and one part is outside the chest wall. And this outside the chest wall part is colonized with the hospital organisms. Now what happens is, when we push the tube in, these hospital-acquired organisms, colonized organisms, we are pushing into the pleural space. They can develop another pleural infection from this hospital-acquired infection. So in any case, whatever it is, pneumothorax or other reasons of pleural effusions or pleural infections, we are not supposed to push the tube in whenever the tube is dislodged or not in the proper place. We should take the tube out and put a new tube. We can, if the tube is too much inside, we can pull the tube out a little bit. That's okay, but not pushing the in.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Dr. We are getting a couple of questions again. And
Yes.
another question is in multiloculated effusion, how to decide on putting ICT?
Yes, multiloculated effusion is not a contraindication for insertion of intercostal drainage. And if it is safe, so one thing, even when we go for diagnostic aspiration, or when we put a drain inside the pleural cavity, that is why we do thoracic ultrasound as well. We should assess whether it is safe to go ahead with aspiration or chest drain. And in doubt, there are some doubtful cases even for us and thoracic surgeons. So in that case, because of other organs and dislocations and things, then we can do non-contrast CT chest to decide whether it is safe to access the pleural cavity. In septated effusion, one thing, we should find a safe place. And a second thing, we can't insert tube everywhere in the chest wall. Suppose we can't put a large tube here, or anterior chest, or in the posteriorly, because then patient can't lie down. Then safe and comfortable site we should access to the pleural cavity. And also we can go to the large loculation. With that, during that blunt dissection also, surgeon can do some maneuvers to break these adhesions as well. So in a large pocket, safe place, we can insert the tube. If it is draining, that is fine. If it doesn't drain, we can try the intrapleural enzyme therapy.
Okay, Dr. Bill. There is another question. Do we still use talc and intrapleural doxycycline for the treatment?
All right. Okay, right. So this is a bit different actually. Yes, we use, it's not mainly for pleural infection. Suppose we have a patient with malignant pleural effusion. That is the commonest indication for pleural disease, talc pleural disease, or that is chemical pleural disease, chemical or talc. Doxycycline is chemical antibiotic. Commonest indication is malignant pleural effusion. If we have a patient with malignant pleural effusion, if there is an superadded pleural infection, in that case, pleural disease is contraindicated. So when we have a patient with pleural infection, we don't do talc pleural disease or antibiotic pleural disease. And so here what happens is, in pleural infection, it's not a matter of recurrent pleural effusion. Here the problem is there are some pockets, it doesn't drain. And again, once we drain it, lung is not expanding. Those are the problems in pleural infection patient. And malignant effusion patient, in contrast to these patients, they have recurrent effusions because of underlying pathology. And these tuberculous patients, tuberculous effusion patient can have a chronic pleural effusion. And those patients also, with time, sometimes pleural effusion is chronic. It can last even 2 months. After 2 months, with successful antituberculous treatment, it will stop. So therefore, these patients, pleural infection patients, instead of pleural disease, what we do is thoracoscopic or thoracotomy debridement. That is, we remove all this debris material, and if lung is not expanding, there's a peel over the visceral pleura preventing lung expansion. We take that peel out so that lung will expand.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. It's a very common practical problem we all are facing. What is the duration of antibiotics in management of empyema?
Right. So when we treat empyema, initial treatment is intravenous antibiotic therapy. The first line drugs, intravenous third generation cephalosporin in combination with clindamycin or metronidazole or piperacillin tazobactam carbapenem alone. Once patient clinically improved, and the clinician is happy, satisfied that patient is clinically improved and no longer patient will deteriorate, and also radiologically improved and drainage is minimal and we are ready to remove the tube as well, then we can switch into oral antibiotic therapy. And the normal duration of IV therapy also may be a bit longer than that of community-acquired pneumonia. So normally in community-acquired pneumonia, if we have oral options, even after 48 hours of fever-free, we will switch into oral antibiotic. Not the case here in empyema. After few days, we will switch into oral antibiotic therapy. When we switch to oral antibiotic therapy, we can consider coamoxiclav, which has both gram-positive negative cover and also anaerobic cover as well. And these empyema patients, complicated parapneumonic effusion patients, and also lung abscess patients, the problem is recurrence. So therefore, they need a longer course of antibiotic, and also antibiotic penetration also is issue. And so once we switch into oral antibiotic, we should review regularly as outpatient with clinical, biochemical, and also radiological improvement. Patient might need longer course of antibiotic, maybe even 4 to 6 week course of antibiotics, sometimes bit longer. So if we need longer than that, actually we will refer to surgeon to remove the focus.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. And now we are going to wind up today's session. And also please answer the MCQs, post-session MCQs, and submit to get your CPD e-certificate. So let me to thank today's speaker, Dr. Upul Pathirana, consultant respiratory physician, for excellent presentation on pleural effusion and empyema. Also, I would like to thank respected virtual participants, audiovisual team, Mr. Dushan and Nimant, and sponsors, Gets Pharma and SLC team for their valuable support. Thank you very much, and we'll meet you again in the next lunchtime feed session at the end of the July. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much again inviting me, and thank you very much for your patience listening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.